This year, Mrs. Alford was planning ahead for Christmas, not waiting till the last minute to get that tree of hers trimmed. So Martine dropped me off one morning in mid-December. But it was Mrs. Alford's brother who opened the door. "Why," he said, "it's Barnaby. How very, very kind of you to call. My sister would have been extremely touched." "Would have been?" "Valerie will want to meet you," the brother said, leading me upstairs. I guessed Valerie was Mrs. Alford's daughter. In Mrs. Alford's bedroom, a woman in baggy slacks was kneeling beside a cedar chest. "It's Barnaby," the brother told her. "Barnaby," she said, and came over. "What will we do without her?" "I didn't even know she was sick," I said. "It was a heart attack, but I think she had some inkling, maybe. She seems to have finished her quilt in a rush, after months of claiming she would never get it finished." The quilt was draped over the edge of the chest, a dark blue cotton rectangle with a gaudy, multicolored circle appliqued to the center. "Planet Earth," Valerie said. The circle was made up of mismatched squares of cloth, joined by the uneven black stitches of a woman whose eyesight was failing. Planet Earth, in Mrs. Alford's version, was makeshift and haphazard, clumsily cobbled together and likely to fall into pieces at any moment. "Do you plan to bring Sophia for Christmas dinner?" my mother asked on the phone. "No," I said. "She's going up to Philly that weekend." "Does that mean you're going too?" "No, I thought I'd stick around and pester you and Dad." Sophia had, in fact, invited me, but I had made up this story about how I didn't want to disappoint my parents. Christmas fell on a Monday this year, and on the Friday I had to handle most of the last-minute chores alone because Martine was helping out at her brother's. Martine's newest nephew was in the hospital with pneumonia, so Martine spent the first part of Friday babysitting, and then I stopped by to collect her for a job at Mr. Shank's. But first, the sister-in-law was late getting back from the hospital, and then when she did, she was weepy and distraught, and Martine didn't want to leave her that way. So I sat waiting in the kitchen until Jeanette said, "Oh, great. Hand me the breast pump, will you? I'm leaking all over the last clean blouse I own." Which reminded me in a hurry that we really ought to be going. "That whole business puts me off," I told Martine in the truck. She was driving. "I don't see how women can stand it. Leaky breasts, labor pains." Martine said, "Hey, I'll let you in on a secret. There's no such thing as labor pains. It's all a bunch of propaganda that's been spread around by women." I laughed. For a moment, she had me believing her. She glanced over at me with a glint in her eye. "They like for men to feel guilty." "Ain't that the truth?" I said. Maybe too emphatically, because she sent me another, keener glance. I said, "Like Sophia's flour bin money, for instance." "Flour bin?" "The money she put in Mrs. Glynn's flour bin when I was accused of stealing." Martine slowed for a traffic light. "Sophia put money in Mrs. Glynn's flour bin?" "Right." "Before she learned Mrs. Glynn had changed her hiding place?" "Right." "Is she out of her mind?" I had this sudden feeling of relief. "She thought you really did steal it." "Looks that way," I agreed. "And the thing of it is," I said, "the money is still in the flour bin." "So?" "It's like hanging over my head," I said. "Every time she wants to buy something, it's, oh, no, she can't because she gave up all her savings for my sake. Everything she owns is sitting in the flour bin. I know she could get it back if she really wanted. Take her own key and go Tuesday or Aunt's podiatrist day or Friday afternoon when her aunt's having her hair done." "What time does she have her hair done?" "I don't know, 4 or so." Martine took a violent left turn. I said, "Mr. Shank's house, Martine, straight ahead. Where are we going?" But I knew the answer. We pressed the doorbell, checking to make sure Mrs. Glynn wasn't home. then fitted the key in the lock. In the kitchen, I opened a cabinet. Glassware. I closed it and opened another. Not a bin in sight. I could kill Mrs. Glynn, I told Martine. She didn't mean any harm. No harm? I practically lost my job. You did not, Martine said. You saw how all our clients backed you up. I walked into the pantry. I said, I wonder how they heard. Heard what? That I needed backing up. Oh, Martine said, I told them. You did? I turned to look at her. Well, I guess I ought to thank you. What for? They're the ones you should thank. The flour bin was in the pantry. Inside was a plastic sandwich bag full of money. Then we heard the front door open. By the time Mrs. Glynn entered the kitchen, I seemed to have run out of oxygen. Martine said in a normal voice, Do you think she left the list in the parlor? My jaw dropped. Because no way would she go off and not tell us what she wanted done, Martine said. I bet she left a list someplace. I stuffed the plastic bag in my jacket pocket as we emerged from the pantry. Mrs. Glynn was standing beside the stove wearing this kind of flown-open expression. She said, Oh, and then, How? There she is, Martine told me. Mrs. Glynn! Hope he didn't give you a scare. Ray couldn't make it today, and so he sent us instead, and when nobody answered the door, Today? Was he coming today? Mrs. Glynn asked. I don't think he was due to come today, was he? Well, maybe he wasn't, I said. I turned to Martine. Do you think we made a mistake? We must have, she said promptly. Better be running along. Sorry about the mix-up, I said as we sidled past. See you, Mrs. Glynn. Bye-bye. Sophia was leaving a message on my machine when I walked into the apartment. And I would just like to know, she was saying. I picked up the receiver. Barnaby, she said, what were you doing at Aunt Grace's house? I couldn't believe my ears. Why did you and that Martine person go there when you surely must have known she would be out? I said to Aunt Grace, who did you say was there? I put the receiver back down. Then I thought, oops. It was my body proceeding without me again. I didn't hang up on purpose. Instead of phoning her back, I grabbed the money and drove to Sophia's house. When I rang her doorbell, an immediate, perfect silence fell. Nobody came to the door. I rang again, but the house went on giving off its numb, dead silence. If there'd have been a mail slot, I'd have slipped the money through it. What she had, though, was one of those black metal post boxes, the kind that doesn't lock. I stood there a while longer, then I left. She was planning to make this difficult. But the nice thing about fussy people is they have their little routines. You always know where you can find them, and when, if you want to track them down. At 9:58 the next morning, she was sitting on a bench at the far end of Penn Station. She said, You hung up on me, Barnaby. I apologize, I told her. I don't know what got into me. Nobody's ever hung up on me, ever. I drew out the money, which I transferred to a plain white envelope for privacy's sake. I'd even put a note inside in case she refused to speak to me. I said, See, it was only that I felt interrogated, you know? Why wouldn't I interrogate you? You walk into my aunt's private home without her permission? Well, naturally, I would wonder what you were doing there. Well, I should think it was obvious what I was doing there. I wanted to get your money back. Did I ask you to get my money back? She glanced at my envelope. Is that what this is? Because I'm not accepting it, Barnaby. You'd have to ram it down my throat before I'd accept it. This was a temptation, but I decided on a different tactic. I said, No, it's something for Opal. Opal? Her, Christmas present. I need for you to take it to her. And I held it out to her. Right then, it mattered more than anything that I get rid of it. Finally, she allowed me to lay the envelope on her palm. "You're asking me to carry this to Opal's apartment?" "Well," I said, "or else—" No, I could see how that might get complicated. "I want you to give it to Natalie at the train station. She knows you're coming. She'll be, yes, at the information island," I said. And then something about how the situation rhymed, so to speak, made me laugh. I said, "I can assure you it's not contraband." A confused, slightly startled expression crossed her face, as if some string had been tugged at her memory, but she went on looking up at me. "Oh, incidentally," my mind was racing now, "if you and Natalie happen to miss connections, I put her telephone number in the envelope. Just call her." Martine and I were packing up Mrs. Alford's house. Her daughter had already asked if we could return tomorrow. I said, "Tomorrow? Tomorrow's Sunday." But I felt obliged to, really, because she told me earlier that her mother had willed me the twin form. "That mannequin thing in the attic," she explained. After that, how could I refuse to come Sunday? I found a length of white flannel in a kitchen drawer, the kind you spread beneath a tablecloth for protection. I draped it over the twin form's shoulders. She gaped at me round-eyed, as if I'd been presumptuous. Suppose my great-grandfather was walking down the street one day, and who did he see but his angel, the woman with the golden braid? "Miss," he'd cry, "Miss, wait up, I never thanked you." She would turn and say, "Me?" She'd be this average, commonplace woman, maybe even homely. "What for?" she would ask, and he would see then that he had been mistaken. There were no angels after all, or that his angels were lots of people he had never suspected. By now, Sophia would be in Philadelphia looking around for Natalie. She'd be glancing down at the envelope more and more frequently, wondering if it was time yet to get Natalie's phone number out. On the wall of Mrs. Alford's kitchen was one of those rechargeable mixers. I unhooked it and placed it in the carton of utensils. Then I unscrewed the mounting plate, and just as I was lifting it from the wall, I felt the most amazing rush of happiness. I was looking at the mounting plate is all. I was staring at those figure-8-shaped holes you slide over the screws. They brought to mind the brass clasps on Martine's overalls. I said, "Martine?" And she said, "What?" And I said, "Haply I think on thee." "Huh?" she said. But I could tell she knew what I meant. In Philadelphia, Sophia was opening the envelope. She was staring down at the money inside, unfolding my note. "Sophia," she read, "you never did realize I am a man you can trust."